Hello there and welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you some techniques that I use to shade when I'm drawing an eye. Now if you watched my last video, you should already have a pretty good idea of how to do a contour line drawing like this. So I start out by outlining the whole part of the iris that I know is going to be completely black. The next thing I typically do on eyes is I go ahead and I outline the rest of that iris. Now I'm going to go ahead and outline this little highlight over here just so that I don't accidentally lose it. Next, I just sketch in that little shadow right there really quickly. I'm also doing the same thing on the other side of the iris so that it matches. I'm going to ever so slightly darken that line right there where the iris meets the waterline. Now I'm going to go through here using a hatching motion, which is just where you draw one line in one direction to shade. And then I'm going to do the same thing coming from the pupil towards that highlight. And then I'm going to do just a little bit more of that cross hatching, but coming from the bottom line. Then I'm just going to tighten up the area around the highlight. And then I decided I needed to darken just a little bit more along here. And then I'm going to take a 6H pencil and I'm going to just put a light wash of it over that highlight on the iris, just so that the charcoal has a little bit of something to blend into other than just plain paper. Alright, now I'm going to take a cotton swab to start blending. And what I'm doing right now is just grazing that paper ever so slightly with the cotton swab, going back and forth just to smooth that charcoal into the paper. And I know I lost a lot of that highlight right there in the iris, but it's okay. We'll bring that out later with an eraser. I just want to make sure everything is blended really well before we start popping out any more highlights. So at this point I think I've got a pretty smooth blend, so I'm just going to take a blending stump and get in those tight spaces that I can't with the cotton swab. So when you're blending, any place that you want to keep the same tone and you just want to smooth it out, you can pretty carelessly just rub the blending stump around. When I want to create a gradient, I will do this flicking thing with the blending stump to pull that color into the other one. And then if you want to bring the lighter color into the darker color, you're going to use a cleaner side of your blending stump and just pull from the light into the dark instead of from the dark into the light. To brighten that highlight back up on the iris, I'm just going to take a kneaded eraser and dab it where I want to lighten. Now that I've got the general values down that I want, I'm just going to work a lot on manipulating it to be exactly right. I do this by pretty much just going back and forth between laying more color down, blending it out, laying it down, blending it out, and so on until I am happy with the final result. So next I'm going to move on to the white of the eye, and I'm pretty much going to just aim to make the entire base for the white of the eye the same tone that is the lightest that we see in the picture. So I'm going to take this cotton swab and just very lightly graze the paper to lay down that flat value for us to start with. Now I'm going to take a dirty blending stump and just start to map out where I want those cast shadows from the eyelashes to be. Now I'm just trying to map out where that highlight from where the light is shining through the eyelashes onto the white of the eye goes on the eye. And I'm still just building those shadows up very slowly. I decided to go ahead and draw in just part of that upper lash line in just a really heavy black because it will give me a pigment for me to actually pull from into the white of the eye, so I'm not just trying to smear my dirty blending stump all over the paper. And I decided to see how this would look if I darkened it a little bit right here, so I'm just doing that by rubbing my dirty cotton swab on the paper. And then I am blending the iris out just a teeny tiny bit just to make it a little bit less harsh. I'm going to do some very detailed lightening up with my kneaded eraser right here real quick. I'm not completely happy with this yet, but I'm going to leave it for now to see if I end up liking it more once I have the details around it done. Now we're going to take a nice and dirty blending stump and drag that black from the iris down into the tear duct. And then we're just going to keep on working to turn that into a pretty basic kind of gradient. And I'm still just moving my blending stump in little tiny circles just to get that gradient really smooth. And then there is a little bit of a shadow coming out from the iris, so we're just going to blend it out a little bit so it's not a completely harsh line. And then we're just going to pop out that highlight right there with an eraser. And then I'm going to smooth it out some more, just working back and forth, building that color up and smoothing it out, making sure everything is nice and blended. To start off on the top eyelid, I'm going to blend just a little bit of pigment in kind of like a transition shade. I'm also going to redefine some of those eyelashes a little bit while I'm doing this, and then I'm just going to keep on blending in that transition shade. And I did pretty much the same exact thing underneath the eye, but a little bit heavier handed because it's a little bit darker down there. And then I also went ahead and did those little lines under her eyes using a blending stump, just building up the color and blending it out back and forth. So now I'm going to start on her eyeshadow. And I'm doing this by going in between the eyelashes just so that they don't get lost. So once I'm happy with my shadow, I'm going to blend it out by taking a cotton swab and just going in little tiny circles over that little line where the two shades meet one another. In some of these spots, I'm first drawing in the eyelash really heavy-handed with my charcoal and then going back through and blending that eyelash to also create that shadow that I need. And every time I finish with one section, I'm going back over the previous sections and making sure that they are all cohesive together. I'm now defining the crease by just drawing over it really harshly with my charcoal. Now I'm just blocking out that part that I'm pretty sure is her eyeliner, just in pure black. And then I am just taking my blending stump and using that black that I already laid down, I'm turning it into the shadow by just kind of blending it out and pulling it and manipulating it into the shadow that I need it to be. And then it's just a whole lot more of going back and forth between laying color down and blending it out. And then from here up into that transition shade, we're just pretty much going to blend a nice smooth gradient. And then I'm using my blending stump and just pulling that black that we had laid down up to where I need it. And then I'm going to take my charcoal and darken it by just making that same little flicking motion, making little hatches, cross hatches. And as with everything else, I'm just going back and forth with blending and darkening and blending and darkening. And then I'm going back and also touching up all of the areas that I had already done previously. And then I am blending out that harsh line, making those tiny soft little circles. I'm just going to continue doing the same thing for these little parts right here. I'm going to go ahead at this point and just draw on the rest of that eyeliner. I'm also going to go ahead and draw on some of those eyelashes. Now I'm just going to pretend that this eyelid right here is just one solid color. And I'm just using my 6H pencil to very lightly lay down that value. Now I'm going to go in and just do the shading on the eyelid by pulling that black color into the lighter color. I'm just going to color in all of this black really quickly right here. And then I'm going to go back to working on those shadows on the eyelid. Now that I'm happy with the eyelid, I'm going to make this line really, really dark first. And once again, I'm just going to pull that darkness up to create another shadow. And then we're going to soften it out with a cotton swab. And then I am sketching in where I think this shadow is going to end. And then to accomplish this shadow, we're just going to build the darkness up and blend it out and go back and forth again using that technique. Here I'm going to lay down just a little bit more pigment, and I'm doing that by just making little cross hatches in the direction that I want it to go. And then we're going to blend once again. And then eternally repeating this process until I am satisfied. And then I did kind of lose my eyelashes a little bit, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem to add them back because we can just follow the bottom of them as a guideline. And then I'm going to finish the rest of the eyelid using the same techniques that I've used for every other part of the eyelid. So I decided that I made the eyeliner the wrong shape, so I'm going to try and fix that. Now I'm going to move on to the rest of the inner corner. I'm first just marking out where those little tiny white highlights are going because I did lose them earlier. I'm starting by just giving it a really light flat shade, and then I'm going to see what it needs from there. I decided right here to take a little bit of charcoal and just darken that bottom part of the inner corner. And then I'm going to smooth it out real quickly, and then returning to building up that inner corner using a dirty blending stump. And then using an eraser, I'm going to clean it up a little bit. I'm now moving on to the lower lash line, but I'm starting out by finishing off this little eyelash area that I kind of left undone. Next, I'm going to try and get this little shadow section right here and the eyelashes that go on top of it. Right here, I'm using some of that pigment from the eyelashes and blending it out into some of that eyeshadow. And when I'm doing the eyeshadow on the bottom lash line, I'm also thinking about how it's going to blend into the eyeshadow on the top lash line. I'm just blending out the edges of what I just did, and then darkening it just a little bit more. And then I'm also adding just a little bit more darkness into the eye itself. And then I'm laying down a flat value on that part of the waterline right there. And then I'm going to start sketching in where I think the shadows go. And then I'm blending them in just a little bit. I'm not doing anything super specific right now, I'm just laying down shadows where I think they'll look good. Okay, so I'm really unhappy with how the shadow's looking down here, so I'm going to try my best to fix it.
I'm just trying to clean up that shadow a little bit with an eraser. And now I'm just blending out that harsh line, making little tiny circles with a cotton swab. And then I'm just making a couple more little adjustments with my eraser on the eye. And now I'm going to try again to draw in those eyelashes now that I've actually done the base correctly. Now I'm going to finish off the rest of her inner corner right up in this area. just starting out by giving it a smooth wash of color. And then I'm also blending that tone out a little bit more because I'm realizing that that whole area was supposed to be a little bit darker. I'm also going to blend it ever so slightly onto the waterline just to have a good transition right there. And then using my blending stump, I'm going to just darken some of the shadows right there. And then I'm just wiggling my blending stump in little tiny circles over that little line just to create a very subtle blend. And then I'm going to darken a little bit more in the waterline with my blending stump again. I'm going to skip to under the lower lashes, and I'm going to go ahead and place this little dark shadow that you see right here. I'm going to bring this shadow down a little bit so that it meets up with this eyelash right here that you can't see yet because I have not yet drawn it. I'm going to go ahead and establish this little shadow under here. Just going to go ahead and draw this little eyelash and just put a little more shadow right there. I'm just further defining some of these eyelashes, and I'm going to sketch in this really long shadow under her eye. Then sketching in more eyelashes. And then lightly sketching in another shadow. And then gonna go through and just give it the slightest little amount of blend. And I'm continuing to just further darken some of those shadows underneath the eye. Also just sketching in any of those eyelashes as I see fit. And then going back and blending out my work. And then I'm just darkening everything up once again. I am finally happy with this, so I'm going to take a white ink pen and I'm going to use this to pop out some of my highlights. It's like magic. So basically anywhere on the picture that I see pure white highlights, I save that part for the very end of the drawing and I just go through with this pen and I pop them out. Since these pens are ink, they obviously don't blend, so you're going to want to make sure that wherever you're using them is something like the highlight in the eye, where it doesn't have to blend into the other shades, it's just a stark white highlight. I'm going through and just making little tiny dots where there's kind of a weird texture in the picture. I think that it's from her glitter eyeshadow, but I'm not entirely sure. If you want to make that highlight not super harsh, just put it down and before it dries, tap it with your finger. And then on the part on the top eyelid, I'm not doing it completely randomly. I'm kind of looking where I see those really white spots and trying to replicate them on my drawing. It's not completely random. If I think that I need more of those little white dots after I've put down the ones that I know are there, I'll sparingly add just a couple more to make it look more cohesive. And then I'm putting just a couple of those dots over here just because I put them everywhere else. May as well have it up here too. And I think that's about it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed and learned something new about drawing today. I will see you next time.